So welcome. Does sound okay? Yeah? How are you doing? Yeah? Okay. Because, for human beings, badness is much more salient, in the mind. What happens is that the goodness, we sort of acclimatize to goodness. It just sort of all that's good starts to blend into the background and just becomes there's maybe some appreciation for it, but it really loses any sense of urgency, and we just sort of habituate to a certain level of goodness. And just as I was walking in and sort of looking around at a lot of familiar faces and people I have a lot of affection for, it's wow, it's a lot of goodness, and there's a way in which we just sort of lose track of that, or lose track of it at least until conditions change and it's not there. But it's said that to know the dharma, to know practice, to know some bit of silence and stillness, this is actually very, very precious. And so as we enter the quiet and practice together, just to the extent that there's some open-heartedness for what the connection you have to other people in the community, to this space itself, to the practice, just let that set a kind of tone in the mind as we sit together. So. Perhaps scanning through the body, and any place where there's tension that can be released, release it. And if any tension remains, just let it remain. You might consciously soften the area around the eyes, the jaw. Letting the arms hang loosely, shoulders to descend. Softening the belly. Letting go of any holding whatsoever in the belly. Appreciating the weight of the body, the downward force of gravity. The relaxation that ripples out from the exhalation. the noises create some contraction in the body, just notice and again soften. We can open the awareness to include the whole field of bodily sensation. To hold the whole body in awareness. The activities of the mind are so innocent, ultimately blameless. The way we anxiously tend to our little plot. The way we stay vigilant for threat, opportunity, the way the attention gets pooled up in seeking security, all so blameless. But maybe it feels safe enough to relax into presence. and to just keep coming back. Something in the heart relaxes when we're with our life. To the extent possible, without strain, we let go of the narrative of mindfulness, the story of the body, of the present moment. And let go more deeply into the sensations that we call the body. Sometimes we say mind like the sky, awareness like the sky, sensations, emotions, thoughts move through that sky like clouds in the openness. But I think what's closer to the truth is that it's all sky. We can know anything as sky when we really give the attention to it. There's not even the slightest preference for sky over cloud. There's just this growing trust and awareness. in these last few minutes, to the extent you feel ready, that the heart feels ready, just open fully to your life. Just let it rush in. In that openness there is a kind of love. Any questions about your practice or anything that the instructions, anything that was said?
Can you repeat what that? You said something about being with your life, the freer the heart gets. Something about being with your life, the freer the heart gets. Was that what you said?
The encouragement was like to the extent the heart feels ready to open to like the fullness of one's life. In that openness, there's a certain kind of love. Yeah?
Well, that was at the end, but this was in the middle.
Oh, I have no idea.
Well, it resonated with me, but like,
Yeah.
I noticed I was kind of grasping it, and I wanted to kind of remember it, but I'm like, no. I just let it go. I said, if it was that, it'll come back.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
I liked what you were saying about the teachers often talk about clouds being like thoughts moving through the sky, but you were saying the truth is more that it's all sky.
Mm-hmm.
Which I found that much more helpful.
Mm.
Just really let it go and not thinking of the object moving through, but letting it all be weightless.
All be
Weightless.
weightless. Yeah. Yeah. So the comment around not that ever, sounds and sensations, thoughts are clouds through the sky, but it's all sky, and something about that creating a certain kind of openness, weightlessness, and there's a way in which, I mean, it's a good image, but what it often does is it creates the sense of like, there I am on the park bench gazing at the clouds against the sky, and kind of have a preference, I want them to move through, and some things are clouds and some are sky, but we can in some ways, like, things only seem to be clouds because we're not looking deeply enough. And that's something that we can explore in our own sensory system, Yeah. Yeah, Josh.
So recently I've been kind of experimenting with sort of using visualization as part of my meditation.
What do you visualize?
Sort of like, it started with sort of practicing with like breathing in suffering, breathing out sort of goodwill.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would kind of let it go, just to see where it went. And it's very gratifying sometimes because I can really discover things about my inner sort of life. But I'm not sure, like, when it gets to be too much and when it gets to be a distraction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that practice that you're describing around, breathing in suffering and breathing out relief of Tonglen, but I don't know that practice, and to speak to it really. And so that's something to ask somebody who actually has because that's a whole path of practice, and so be good to I would defer to other folks on that. But I think the way to judge if something's getting to be too much is, like, does it start to feel kind of like busy? Does it feel like you're turning your meditation, like you're gamifying your meditation, and it starts to feel that way, like maybe that's a sign, but I would really look, especially after you get up, like, what are the qualities of the mind that have been established during those minutes of practice? And if there's a sense of settledness and clarity, openness, open-heartedness, like, sounds good. Yeah. Maybe one or two more. Yeah, please.
Some days I feel like my mind wanders more and lose focus on meditation. Some days I'm better at it, but what would you say to someone who's new with the practice and generally has struggles with their mind wandering and forgetting what they're doing when they're meditating?
Yeah, sure. So a question around mind wandering. Well, there's one piece which is an insight, namely that we don't govern our attention. Like that's something that actually is influenced by many different factors, and so, just a million things. Fatigue, what happened the minute before you walk in, this day, this life, like all of it. And so I'll just say a couple things. One is not to get too identified, not to make like the good meditation the time when you're concentrated and the bad meditation the time when you're not concentrated. So like there's value in just like being willing to stay, and like the monkey mind keeps pulling you in, but you're just staying, and you're returning as when you notice it, like, and you're learning what obsesses the mind, and you're learning maybe something about your whole heart and emotional system, like based on where the mind goes. Like there's a lot of learning that happens that is outside of the scope of concentration, of the settledness of the mind. So that's one piece. You're not wasting your time. Really, there's a whole training that's happening just in being willing to be still. That's valuable in itself. And then as far as the practice, you want to get clear on what is within the circle of focus space and what's outside it. And what you put inside it can be anything. It could be the breath right here. It could be the whole body like we did. It could be the whole body and sound. It could be the body and mind and sound and sight. It could be right? But you want to know what's inside that focus space and what's outside it. And to the extent that simple bodily objects the line drawn around the bodily objects tends to be brighter than the line drawn when you're doing other kinds of practices. So there's a general encouragement to stay with the body. Maybe it's breathing, maybe it's the whole body. And the encouragement would also be to use mental noting, which is, how many people like use mental noting at least some of the time? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is like a way of using thoughts, subtle thoughts, to track experience and deepen the connection we have with experience. So sometimes people use mental notes or labels just to say like thinking, and to actually mark off that line that separates what's in the focus space from what's distraction. But we can actually use mental labels as a way of not merely distinguishing between the focus and the distraction, but actually deepening our connection with the object of attention. And so when we note like breathing in and breathing out, that's a kind of mental note that's designed to actually help the attention soak more deeply into the experience. And sometimes you can figure out like what a good rhythm of mental noting is, but I would use it, and you'll be astounded how much you still get caught up. But it creates a kind of feedback loop where you start to hear the silence of the labels. We're no longer labeling, and that like reminds us more quickly, oh, I've lost track with the object, and now I'm in some fantasy or memory or something. Yeah, does that sound okay? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, one more. Yeah, please.
3 years in, and I still find that I'm with the people who are just starting, because my actual experience has not changed all that much, only that I don't want to run out the door screaming quite as quickly once the sit starts. But
I dig that. Thank you. Yeah.
No question. That was all.
Oh, yeah. So, do people here? Should I say it, Paul, for the crew? Yeah. 3 years in and feeling like the newbies are my people, because like the main change is either mind is still has some of those same qualities, and the change is that I don't feel like running out of the room. So. Yeah, on the one hand, this is as some teachers say, this is like a marathon, not a sprint. And we just have to, this is a very humbling practice. Like, it doesn't say that on our flyers. Like, come be humbled, and hopefully it's not humiliating, it's framed in such a way that it's not actually like we're not learning like terrible things about ourselves or our limitation. That's not it, but it is really humbling, and I think, when the conditions are just right, or maybe we say just wrong, it can feel like we've never meditated before. In fact, subtly, it feels that way more than we realize. Like we're in that mode where we kind of know what we're doing, but we're sort of pretending to be mindful. And there's a way that like the half, kind of pretending to be mindful is actually gets more complicated than just acknowledging, like, I have no fucking clue how to be with this, And so we actually want to look for the experience of feeling just like a rank amateur, because it happens every sit. There will be a moment where it's like, this may not consciously arise, but there's a little bit of a sense of like, how on earth can I be with this? Like, how do I practice? Like, what is mindfulness? And that happens at a kind of subtle level, and we just sort of like paper over it and move forward. But to the extent that we can appreciate that sense of being, like, of needing to learn what mindfulness is again, that's a beautiful thing, Like, may that be so for all of us. May we, like, at some point in each practice period, like, relearn what mindfulness is. I went through a phase in my practice where I sort of was, I'd been soaking in it for some years and practicing in a kind of dedicated way, and I was so familiar with all of the categories and all of the kind of experiences, and I know what my habits are, and I know where I get and I just like it. I just got too knowing for my own good, and I was like, that's it. I'm throwing out everything, and I'm gonna like try to discover what it is to be human all again. And I don't want anybody else's language. I don't want the Buddha's teaching. I don't want mindful, I don't want, like, I'm just gonna like begin again, like really begin again. And I'm gonna come to my own understanding, to become, like there's a phrase, like to become independent in the dharma. Yeah? Meaning that we don't care what anybody says anymore. Sounds kind of punk rock, but it's like, yeah, that phrase, kill the Buddha, and so, yeah, let's delight in our like rank amateur status, and yeah. And then the last thing I'll say is like it's actually hard to track progress in our. It's like we're looking, we're not just. It's not like we're looking in the mirror to see how our, haircut is coming in or something like each day. It's like we're looking like 1 billion times a day. How am I doing? And we're like looking so much that change is actually hard to discern. And a lot of the letting go on this path, I don't know how it happened or when it happened or why or what the mechanisms were. I just like find myself waking up to just like, oh, I don't suffer in that way anymore, or I don't quite suffer as much in that way anymore. Yeah. So I'm glad you're here and you've persisted, and yeah, cool. Sometimes it feels weird to talk this much, and you're all just so quiet. Tonight is one of those nights. So last week, or a couple Fridays ago, actually, I began with that a phrase quote from Leonard Cohen, and want to move that conversation forward, and also talk about the relationship between some of those insights and love. How does that fit together? So the quote was I know your burden's heavy as you wheel it through the night. The guru says it's empty, but that doesn't make it light. Yeah. And we explored the sense of heaviness, of lightness, of emptiness. And one Thai forest monk, Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, sort of like a main core aspect of his teaching, said, he expressed the wish that may all beings dance at ease in the breeze, with minds left silent by laying to rest all things. I said that, and I've been alluding to it a little bit in the instructions, that the more still we become, the thinner, the more porous the world starts to feel. And this can be very dramatic, and it can be more subtle. We can sense that just when we get a little bit of a maybe intuitive hit of like the sky-like nature of clouds, yeah? That the sense, maybe it's like the body beginning to like open up, and we get still, and the sense of like the kind of boundaries start to get fuzzier, the sense of like space starts to like run through the body itself, yeah? And this is pointing to the kind of, the Buddhist model of peace, which is like very counterintuitive. And I have some questions about myself, some hesitations, but the experience of it is quite transformative. And the Buddhist model of peace is to be essentially unstimulated by any experience, pleasant or unpleasant, yeah? And this is there's a kind of, this is the aspiration, at least in the early Buddhist teachings. It's like, may the heart not be, not just not be touched by anything, may nothing arise in perception to stimulate the heart whatsoever. You know? And that even the most like subtle objects of perception, like, you know, seeing something or feeling something or having a thought, even that is like ruffles the awareness in a way that they would call dukkha, suffering, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, yeah? And a part of me, it's got a, there's this strong theme in early Buddhism of like, get me out of here. You know, like that's a little the relationship to the world, you know? It's like, get me out of here. Like, I do not want like to be touched by the world anymore. Yeah? And there's a kind of realization of like, that the world is always touching us, right? We're seeing right now. We have a sense of embodiment, and there's thinking and emotion, like there are all these things. All of these experiences, they're like bombarding us in a certain way. And so in this, maybe we say life denying turn within the Buddhist, early Buddhist canon, there is like the highest peace is the non-arising of self and world. Yeah. Of cessation, of like the highest peace is a special kind of nothing. Now, part of me is like a little hesitant, and it's almost like getting too precious about peace. You know, like it's like fetishizing like this like absolute peace, you know, and when teachers talk about like enlightenment and awakening, stream entry, these things, like that's what they're talking about from this tradition, yeah. And I'm not dismissive of any of that, and it is important for us to know what it's like for the nervous system to essentially flatline, you know, like to actually know, to know non-suffering. I'm sympathetic to it. There's some ambivalence, some skepticism, and a sympathetic in the sense that I think we can acknowledge, like when we tune, this sounds like so depressing. So just as a warning, you know, like, but even the most exquisite experiences, you know, like I talk about love all the time. And, you know, it's like, even the most exquisite, boundless, rapturous experience of love is unsustainable for the heart. The only thing that doesn't fatigue the heart whatsoever is peace. And so in the Buddhist tradition, this is highlighted as like the sort of like deepest aspiration. Now, in terms of like the least burdensome perceptions, usually like something like space is considered like the least burdensome, the most conducive to peace. And so a lot of the metaphors around freedom are like this like movement towards more and more spaciousness. And Analyo, how many people have read some of Analyo, the kind of, translator and monk. He describes this kind of progressive letting go of perceptions that's moving in the direction of meditative absorptions of the perception of like nothing but space. Body, sound, sight, gone. No trace of a mind, so to speak, or body, but this like very vivid experience of just only space, space in every direction without center. Yeah. And it said, like, actually gives some instructions around this of beginning to appreciate spaciousness and the emptiness. Here's what he says. One might start by opening the eyes and looking at the space in front of the place where one is sitting. As one keeps gazing, one mentally sort of moves back or inwards to become aware of that which knows the seeing. that which receives the visual information that enters through the eyes. Shinzen, one of my teachers, said, like, listen for the most distant sound. Like, normally we are very attentive to, like the loudest, most abrupt kind of sounds, but listen to the most distant sound and then listen further. Yeah? Or feel the body. You can close your eyes for a moment. Just feel the field of sensation that is the body. And maybe the kind of outline of the body is clear or fuzzy. But feel the edge, where you imagine the edge between body and world to be. And then move the awareness beyond the edges of the body into space. You can open your eyes. So, this kind of path of practice is aimed at deconstructing two senses of self-identification. The first is that the kind of views we have of ourselves. I am this, I'm not that. And the second sense of self-identification that spaciousness, emptiness is actually meant to address is the sense of the center point of one's being. The sense of something like the kernel of preciousness behind receiving experience. And those two kind of senses of self are what's like being met in these kinds of teachings and deconstructed. And ultimately, I feel like the function of that is actually to lead us into a deeper love and service. Like, that's the value of that. But this side of practice has a very dry kind of feeling. Like, I read a quote last week, like, to be enlightened is to be totally alive and totally dead at the same time. Does that sound like a party? Like, does that sound like love? Right? And I think in the Theravadan tradition, like in this insight tradition, the connection between these series of insights and love, they're not as well spelled out as some of the connections between wisdom and love in Mahayana, in subsequent Buddhist tradition. But there's I think we can put together some pieces to see the ways in which these insights actually serve love in a very tangible way. So I want to say something about this. You know how you can kind of feel how much wisdom there is in the love, in somebody's like expression of love, or, you can like sense whether that love reflects like a deep encounter with the full range of what it is to be human, with joy and sorrow, and it's like, somehow that love is like, it's infused with a certain kind of wisdom, and I can sort of trust that love more deeply, Like sometimes I hear love talked about in these ways that it just has a very thin feeling. Like I want my love to, like somehow to fully honor the complexity of being human and the enormity of suffering. Like that has to like have its place in the love, And there are some people who really, embody that. My experience has been that most teachers kind of fall on the love side or the wisdom side, and they sort of like their most comfortable zone is one pole or the other. It's not the case with everyone, but Michelle McDonald, who I mention often, is she for me, there's something about her, the expression of like love and wisdom that feels like exquisitely balanced. Like you can actually feel the inseparability of insight and love. So this is with an interview that she did. She says, she's being asked about like her, I think 30 years of teaching, and she says it's pretty simple. Mindfulness is like offering people spring water in the desert. When mindfulness is present, when greed, hatred, and delusion are absent, there is true nonviolence. There is peace. And helping to end greed, hatred, and delusion inside oneself or for others turns out to be the same process. To know that the source of this peace is available any time for us is deeply inspiring and joyful. It doesn't depend on age at all. I recently came from teaching a teen retreat on our land in Hawaii. At the end of the retreat, one teen said to me, "Thanks for making me feel like I have the right to know the truth." We do have the right to understand what nonviolence really means, beyond just being a good idea, and to actually go through a process of undertaking that discipline, the joy and hardship of it, to stick it out for 5, 10, 40 years, is the art of life. And this is why I teach. So, clinging complicates everything. Have you noticed that? Like, it just, we like, yeah, it just gets us into so much trouble, you know, like, it makes everything complicated. And what we're really talking about, like these insights into spaciousness, emptiness, letting go, they're insights born of non-clinging. Yeah? And so we can see the ways in which clinging compromises love, you know? Right? Like, to the extent that we're holding, to that extent the heart is constricted. Yeah? Like, the focus goes in and we're like hanging on to something, we're trying to engineer something, trying to control something, and all of that moves cross purposes with like the openness and the letting go that is love, right? The generosity that is love. We see how clinging to pleasure constricts the heart, but also importantly, like clinging to views, clinging to self-view. Like, maybe it doesn't, yeah, maybe it seems harmless to be like, I'm awesome. I'm awesome. Like, oh, that's just self-affirmation. I'm just, you know, I'm awesome. It's a total shit show. It's like insisting on that is like just guarantees so much suffering, you know? It seems like kind of innocent, but it's like, it's just, we gotta look, yeah? So, our self-view is like, it's never sufficient on its own. Like, I can never be like, I'm awesome, and fully believe that. Like, our sense of self, like, is totally vulnerable and depends on the mirroring in the world, right? And this, like, when we like start, like, insist on certain self-views, what comes is that we start to, yeah, it puts us just naturally on our heels, right? Because potentially any one of you can completely fuck up my night. Right? Like, I'm awesome, and then there's that person like giving me the finger or whatever, you know, like with their eyes, you know, it's like, it's a very precarious position to be in, yeah? And we like go through these routines in our own mind where we're arguing for a kind of sense of who we are, and then just like assessing, okay, what's the evidence coming back to me? Like, is this, you know, like how's it? Yeah. And it's like we're trying to like feel fully comfortable in the sweater of self, but it's like just kind of a little weird fitting, you know, like it like we never like no one becomes the person they think they are. Yeah. It just like there's this childlike hope that we're gonna like arrive sometime, you know, and like be like perfectly fill out that sweater, you know, and I know that's a weird image, but I just don't think it comes. It's always it's never quite right, yeah, and so. We like if we're intent on doing it, if we're intent on that, it just like there's an inherent defensiveness of that. We can't be fully open to the world, to others, to the people who approve and disapprove, to all of the kinds of views. And like there's so much safety in letting go of that. Yeah. There's so much safety. And when there is safety, there can be love. These kinds of constrictions in the mind, because we're sort of like cross-validating our sense of who we are with the world, like there's a whole like host of afflictive emotions that become like are brought into existence. So like envy, for example, yeah, and like the whole like range of the comparing mind, yeah. It's just like assessing, you know, like this so acutely painful, right? But if we were not identified as something, like what power would the comparing mind have over us? Yeah. That always is parasitic on insisting we are something. But if we are letting go of that, then there's no ground for those comparisons to even arise. There's no impulse to say I'm less than or more than, or as the Buddha says, even equal to. We're like stepping out of that whole realm. And there's something about seeing through self, these two ways in which we see through self, see through self-view and see through the more kind of subtle conceit of I amness. What happens is that the selfing, and the suffering that attendant to that selfing, like that becomes more and more poignant. So it's not like seeing the illusory nature of self, like actually leads us into kind of opposition with the self. It actually is like engenders more and more love for like self and its suffering, for the ways in which we're like, the image I had was like, we're like doing, like trying to make like some watercolor painting on the surface of water. And it just like, yeah, it's like the more distant we get from the sense of self, the more open the mind is, the more we actually see through self. The kind of more urgent our love becomes for all the ways in which we get ensnared and the self coagulates into something that we feel defensive. And so there's this kind of feedback mechanism of insight and love. And the selfing is no longer, that itself is no longer personal. Yeah? There's certain, there's a blamelessness to all of that. Maybe the last thing I'll just share, because we've got to stop, is that when we know ourselves as space, space is like, maybe we say very highly suggestible. That is, that there's just one drop of love when there are no impediments flavors everything. And that kind of love is very spontaneous and generative and skillful. So let's sit for a moment. So please pick up whatever is useful of these words and leave the rest behind. May the sincerity of our efforts, may the goodness of us coming together in nonviolence, may this ripple out. May whatever freedom, joy, love is ours, may this be shared in all directions. So, do you want to make any announcements, Jason, or no? Okay. Let's see, just a couple of things. For me, I'm going to be away at UCLA for a few weeks, which I do each summer, and do help teach an undergrad class in mindfulness there. So I'll see you in a little bit. center's run on generosity of people who practice here, so that's appreciated. Thank you in advance. And I'll hang. If some of that talk was like super not relevant, that's totally cool. Also, I will hang out after for a while. So if you have want to talk one-on-one, I'm happy to connect. Yeah.
Do you want to mention tomorrow?
Sure. So tomorrow there's a joint presentation with the San Francisco Suicide Prevention Center, and so we'll sit and talking a bit about talking about suicide and about its prevention, and I'll reflect on the place of dharma and mindfulness, and also the limitations of practice in meeting certain forms of suffering and the necessity of a kind of team approach. And anybody is welcome. So
Is that here?
That's here. Yeah, tomorrow at 7:30. Yeah.
Throwing some softballs.
Throwing some softballs. Right. I'm like an atrocious publicist. It's like, okay. All right. Be well, folks. Thank you.